Pedro Sanchez's sewer to get rid of judges, prosecutors, and Guardia Civil officers who were investigating his family, his circle, and his party was directly funded by the Socialist Party. Let's get started. Hello everyone and welcome to a new edition of Medidas Cautelares. And today we have to keep breaking down the Socialist Party's cesspool, the cesspool around Pedro Sánchez. Because, take note, the illicit activity of this criminal organization was paid for through fake invoices by the Socialist Party itself. Let's continue breaking down the judicial order by National Court Judge Santiago Pedraz about the sewers of the PSOE. An investigation that, as you know, has exploded within the framework of the so-called CEPI scheme, and there are already a lot of people charged. And today we're going to review the second part of the order, which specifically refers to how the criminal activity of this scheme was directly funded by the Socialist Party. But first, don't forget to subscribe to the Medidas Cautelares channel because we're already cruising at a tremendous speed. Thank you all very much, and now let's move on to review that second part of the order. This activity, says Judge Pedraz, was carried out in a coordinated manner, maintaining unity of action and direction, personified in this case by Santos Zerdan. They did this moreover following a strategy, something that Law Layer 10 itself mentions on several occasions, even going so far as to state the following. We already have a strategy, we've been working on it for months, also adding that everything is perfectly coordinated. In this sense, and in addition to the above, he clearly stated what his priorities were with this activity, pointing out the main one as the president, that is Sánchez. He also added that it is, since without that there is nothing else. A particularly significant and at the same time demonstrative element of this unity of action and direction is evident in the way the costs were covered and the logistical needs of the investigated activity were met. At the same time, the analysis of these points also highlights the superior role held by Santos Zerdan, since as the Secretary of Organization of the PSOE, he would have merged the criminal structure with the party's own structure. This is extremely serious. From the start, he backed the investigation, providing his staff to help. What administrative roles did he fill? What were his main priorities? He bore the cost of the activity under investigation and allowed it to use his staff for administrative functions. Did he provide his facilities for holding in short meetings, or did he cover the logistics cost for some of his members? This can be seen from the very beginning as exemplified by the previously mentioned meeting that took place on April 26, 2024 at the party headquarters in Ferraz. From it, a series of points of interest can be extracted. Regarding the group's activity, it is noted that there was a reference to the Prime Minister's public appearance, which took place on April 29, 2024, where he announced his decision. After the period of reflection, Lerelex already told Vicente Fernandez that, quote, "The President of the government is referring to everything we are doing," end quote, making direct reference to the use of the information provided by the group under investigation, that is, by the sewer. In a similar way, and regarding this same appearance, Juan Maserano addressed Lere X to tell her to look at how the boss mentions the audio recordings. Concerning the provision by Santos Zerdan of the party's logistics, it has already been pointed out that the meeting took place at the headquarters located on Ferraz Street. Like so many others that took place over time and number at least 22 meetings, most of which were held between Santos Zerdan and Lere X, which would have served for coordination and for Lere to give reports. Thus, the first known meeting is dated April 26, 2024, coinciding with the one being analyzed, and the last one on April 11, 2025. This constant relationship between the two was not limited to meetings held at the headquarters, but in addition to these, there is evidence of at least 17 other meetings held between Santos Zerdan and Lere X during this period, the locations of which are unknown or took place outside the headquarters, with the last one dated May 21, 2025. On the same day as the meeting, dated April 26, 24, and after it ended, a party employee sent Lere X the reservation for a plane ticket to return to her usual residence. In this case, it is Covadonga San Pedro Pascual, an employee with administrative duties in the party, who sends this to her via WhatsApp, with this message coinciding with the start of the conversation between the two. This highlights two issues. The involvement of employees with administrative duties who would have purchased and managed the ticket on behalf of, in this case, Lere Diez, and on the other hand the party's assumption of the cost of the ticket. This also happens repeatedly over time and from this moment on. In the case of Lere, this would have happened on at least 4 occasions, that is, 4 times when a specific trip would have been arranged and paid for, which was also intended to carry out some kind of action related to the events under investigation. As for Javier Pérez Dolcet, there is evidence of payment for a trip, in this case to Zaragoza, with the purpose of attending a meeting which he attended accompanied by Lere. In addition to Covadonga, Lere X also maintains contacts in this regard with a second-party employee, Celia Rodriguez. Shortly after this meeting, Lere X already begins to tell those around her that Santos Cerdán wants to compensate her for the services she was providing. Specifically, it was on May 12 when Lere the X told Vicente Fernandez that, quote, she was thinking that what Santos wanted to pay her could be done directly through Andalucadi, right? Adding regarding this same matter that she didn't know if she liked them doing it through Gaspar's office, referring to Gaspar Zarias and his company Zaño Sociedad Consultora. On April 26, 2024, Lere X began receiving funds from Zaño Sociedad Consultora, receiving 4 payments of €4,000 each. About the link between payments from Zaño and Santos Cerdán, it's noted that at one point, as they were about to end, Lere had a conversation with Vicente in which he told her, but you'll have to talk to Santi as well, because he is ultimately your client. After the payments from Zaño Sociedad Consultora stopped, Santos Cerdán and Lere X set up a second procedure, this time using 2 companies managed by Ismael Oliver as intermediaries. To do this, they falsified an engagement letter signed by Ana María Fuentes Pacheco in her capacity as the PSOE's Federal Director General. This party paid Estudio Jurídico, Ismael Oliver y partners an amount of €27,225, and with the aim of obscuring the trail of the funds, Ismael Oliver paid this same amount to Lere, but in this case from a second company, Oliver Group. Regarding the intention behind using 2 companies, it is Ismael Oliver himself who tells Lere X, and I quote, I'm going to think about it, but I'll probably do one with one company and the other with the other, so they aren't linked. What do you think? Lastly, emphasizing the fraudulent nature of the invoicing, a conversation between Lere X and Ismael Oliver, the lawyer, would also be highlighted, in which he says to her, I have a question we need to resolve before the transfers, which is what description I should put on each one, to which Lere responds. That for the parent company 1, legal and commercial consulting, for example, and for the other one, I think I should also put consulting work. As the last relevant point to mention about this initial meeting, it should be noted that on the same day it took place, Patricia Lopez, the journalist, made herself available to the activity under investigation through Lere X and Santos Cerdán. Also, shortly after this meeting, presumably in May 2024, the party would have sent Patricia Lopez, through the company Grupo Crónica Libre SL, an amount close to €20,000. For this, Santos Cerdán would have arranged for this amount to be paid through an advertising campaign. John Antolin was the one in charge of handling it, and the person who contacted Patricia to say, Hello Patricia, this is John Antolin. The order is already included in the media plan. The agency handling it will get in touch to manage it. It will be close to 20,000. That is, this scheme also affects journalists and members of the Socialist Party's communications team. Let's continue. Within the different lines of action developed by the group under investigation, that is, by the sewer network, a significant role was given to the dissemination of certain information obtained through the joint and prior actions of Lere Diez, Javier Pérez Dolcet, and Patricia Lopez, as detailed in sections 3 and 4 of the report. The media outlet Crónica Libre, established in April 2022, played a leading role in disseminating this information, which in some cases consisted of recordings originating from the committee's archives, Commissioner Villarejo, and other sources related to various legal cases. This seems to be evidenced by one of the notes seized from Lere Diez, where the creation of a newspaper is linked to what is referred to as Operation PSOE. This is incredible. Everything we're reading is incredible. It's an A to Z. It's a manual of corruption, of creating a cesspool within the ruling party, within Pedro Sánchez's party, and prompted by the Prime Minister himself. And we're going to wrap up. If you like this video, then we'll make a second video completing the court order. We're going to wrap up. I think we're already on the last page. It says that to this scheme, Judge Pedro says, Javier Pérez Dolcet joined for personal interest. He is under investigation in different cases at the National Court, in which the prosecutor Pepe Grinda, Jose Grinda, was in charge of his case. He attempted to give compromising information to the prosecutor and worked with other suspects to find information through other accused individuals. In important cases investigated within the Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office, such as Villarejo, Francisco Martínez, Nervis, Villalobos, Villalba, Sánchez, Yepes, Parra, Hamlin, Rosell, confidential, secret, or compromising information about the UKO commanders involved in those investigations, as well as the Chief Prosecutor of the Special Prosecutor's Office, that is, about Alejandro Luz. They also allegedly tried to use supposed information that Villarejo might have about other judges, prosecutors, politicians, and police commanders, which had been unknown until now, according to what they stated in their interviews. Among the targets of interest were Francisco Martínez, PSOE Andalucía, the persecution of Pedro Sánchez by Begoña, judges, prosecutors, especially Grinda, or police, civil guard, and CNI. To this end, the aforementioned Ismael López, the lawyer of Nervis Villalobos, former Deputy Minister of Energy in Hugo Chávez's government, would have directed his efforts. Between 2004 and 2006 of Venezuelan nationality and investigated in other cases handled by Prosecutor Grinda, such as Duro Felguera, and Columbus. In defense of his own interests, he tried to influence Prosecutor Grinda's actions in those proceedings by using the testimony of a woman who had an ongoing lawsuit against him, as part of that collaboration between Lerex, Oliver, and Nervis, in which the possibility of paying 300,000 euros to Prosecutor Grinda was also considered, among other things, to close his cases, acknowledging that they were the result or consequence of abusive actions. Lerex would have tried, in return and at the request of Ismael Oliver, to get Nervis Villalobos to obtain a quick resolution of his Spanish nationality application and the ownership of bank accounts in Spain using his contacts. On October 22, 2024, Lerex informed him that on Friday, that is October 25, 2024, the party's number 3 is going to see her. The report includes evidence that such a meeting took place at the PSOE headquarters. In particular, a person identified as Henry Molano Moreno had a conversation with Lerex in which he thanked her for the treatment received, extending his gratitude to Santos and Juan. For her part, Lera sent a message to Vicente telling him, "Ler, today Santi said nice things about me to the girl from Jaén." From that date on, there were ongoing contacts with the aforementioned woman, Miriam Serrano, letting Lerex know that she was preparing things against that jerk. On the other hand, the report states that, at the end of 24, Lerex had exchanged various documents with the lawyer Ismael Oliver regarding the processing of Nervis's nationality application. Oliver would raise this issue repeatedly at the beginning of 2025, including it in one of his conversations. Among his requests was an interview with the governor of the Bank of Spain, José Luis Escrivá, or someone he trusted, for which Lerex would have contacted Jana, a person who could correspond to attention with Jana Hayul Muro, at that time a member of the European Parliament for the PSOE, later reporting to Ismael Oliver. In this regard, a series of messages exchanged between Lerex and the aforementioned Nervis are recorded in the report. To facilitate contact with Miriam Serrano at the PSOE headquarters between October 24 and 25, 2024. As you can see, new characters keep appearing throughout this whole story. It's incredible, all the garbage, all the mess that's been set up, and all of it precisely around Pedro Sánchez and his party. We're going to wrap up now, as I said, regarding the role played by Lerex. Once the elements are presented, it could be deduced that during the investigation period she would have been paid by the PSOE. Again, it is useful to pay attention to her own words, for example, during a meeting with the prosecutor. Estampa describes himself as someone who has supported the PSOE, claiming the role of the foreigner's right-hand man. He also adds that this is a right-hand man who will never appear anywhere. In similar terms, he introduces himself to Francisco Martínez, former Secretary of State for Security, in this case stating, I quote, "The PSOE puts me in charge," repeatedly emphasizing his behind-the-scenes role. When he says that I have the best connections in this world and so on, but the best way to act is to be nothing. But not only does she claim that role for herself, the author also assigns it to her. The lawyer Jacobo Tejelo, when in a meeting with the civil guard captain Juan Sánchez Yepes, Tejelo introduces Leire Diez as a person from the PSOE. To conclude this matter, it is also Leire Diez herself who, during one of the meetings she had with the former Secretary of State for Security Francisco Martinez, told him that any information he provided would be passed on to those who told me to put whoever she wanted in charge of all this. Adding that they are on Ferraz Street in communication with the Moncloa Palace because, as you know, the party from Ferraz is in power. And we finish now with the last page of this order. It says, in short, there is serious incriminating evidence showing that, through Santos Cerdán, who at that time was the party's Secretary of Organization, the investigated activity would have been supported by the party, both from the point of view of its financing and various logistical matters. Later on, during the course of the investigated criminal activity, there was a new milestone considered to be of interest, as it involved the integration of a new member into the organization, as well as the participation of new participants in the acts under investigation. This refers to the release of Aldama, which took place on November 21, 2024. After this release, on the same day, Leire X contacted Ismael Oliver to inform him that they've let Aldama out. Unbelievable, I have spoken with Santos Cerdán. They will meet with you to discuss the party's legal strategy and the defense because this is a disaster. In a similar vein, early the next morning, Vicente Fernandez asked Leire X if she had seen Aldama's statement, to which Leire replied, "Finally, it seems that my insistence on changing the party's legal strategy has taken hold, and we will do it with Ismael and Jacobo," referring to Ismael Oliver and Jacobo Tejelo. From that moment on, Ismael Oliver would become part of the organization under investigation, participating in some of the lines of action which will be presented, as well as in the fund channeling operation from the PSOE to Leire X, as already mentioned. For his part, Jacobo Tejelo, although his integration into the organization depends on the outcome of future proceedings that may be carried out. The truth is that he began acting in a way that materially advanced to the interests and objectives of the organization. In fact, he was appointed as the person responsible for one of the lines of action, the so-called hydrocarbons line of action. It was Leire X who, from a position of hierarchical superiority, told him, "I've already assigned all this hydrocarbon stuff to you." In this case, the organization focused its activity on a series of legal cases related to fraud in the hydrocarbon sector, since they considered them linked to the cases affecting the party and the government, and therefore a means to achieve their ultimate goal, since they believed that if they managed to bring about nullities in the first cases would carry over to the legal cases that made up their ultimate goal. This was expressed by Tejelo himself in a conversation with Javier Pérez Dolcet in which it is recorded. What I can tell you is that this is more of an opportunity for them, the government, than for me or my client. First of all, because the proceedings could be declared null, and that could extend to the Coldo cases. It was considered a top priority for the organization, as can be seen from numerous elements, among which stands out that, in Leire's words, this line would have been Santos Cerdán's priority by order of El Juan. Finally, regarding Jacobo Tejelo, it is noted that he would have received at least 125,000 euros from the PSOE. The payments were covered by apparent documentary support and false invoicing, the creation of which would not have been possible again. And just as in the case of the payments to Ismael Oliver, without the drafting of an engagement letter which is required by law, Leire, through Santos Cerdán and ultimately signed by Ana María Fuentes Pacheco in her capacity as Federal Director General of the PSOE party. That is to say, once again, the role of someone from the PSOE party appears in this scheme. Well, you just heard it. Incredible, incredible. The very Socialist Party itself, the manager of the Socialist Party, making fake invoices to fund the Socialist Party's own dirty tricks machine. They had to protect the number one, Pedro Sánchez, the number one in this criminal scheme, when it was being investigated. his wife, his brother, his party, his right-hand man, his former right-hand man, and so on. Let's hope the investigation keeps moving forward and that everyone who needs to fall does, because in Spain we don't deserve this corrupt government, this Sanchez government. And that's it for this edition of Medidas Cautelares. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, leave your comments, your opinions. I know these days everything we're experiencing is extremely relevant, and thank you so much for being there every day. You can leave your feedback, what you think is going to happen with this investigation, and don't forget, better said remember, to subscribe to the Medidas Cautelares channel so we can keep pushing every day and keep bringing you the best information. You already know, you can become members in the chosen tier for less than €3 a month or in the supreme tier for less than €7 a month. You can also make contributions via Bizum at 627-556-370, 627-556-370. The most important thing, as I always tell you, is that this information reaches everyone because information is power. See you soon.